So let's begin today's class. We introduced meditation posture last week, and we talked a bit about the purpose of meditation and so on. So we'll just start with settling the mind. So we'll do a short breathing. So just however it is that you're seated, do your best to adopt a stable, comfortable posture. You want to think having your feet flat and your back straight and torso open, hands in the lap, right over left, with the palms upturned and the thumbs gently touching, forming a gentle triangle. Palms are the hands are up against the body with a nice soft belly. Your eyes are gently closed or slightly open. When you have a gentle, slightly downward gaze, and you want to try to maintain an awareness of not slouching, not leaning. You also want to relax, not to hold unnecessary tension in the body. So you kind of let the body hang on itself. It just sort of falls into place. And the spine is nice and straight. The upper body can just sort of hang on that frame. And then begin to just cultivate the view of no need to attend to the environment. Just whatever sights or sounds there are, no need to think about them, investigate them, and just don't let them go. Moving your awareness inward, away from interacting with the environment. And then try to become aware of whatever sensations you can observe that are accompanying the in breath and the out breath and the space around the opening of the nostrils. Just breathing naturally, breathing normally, and trying to hold mind, present moment physical sensations are accompanying the in breath and the out breath. So for the next 5 minutes, we'll just do our best to hold to that object, giving ourselves the instruction to notice quickly when other distracting thoughts or feelings arise. And then when that happens, simply to lift our awareness up from those distractions and to place our awareness back on that present moment physical sensation. All right, and then we will come back together. All right, so let's begin by talking a little bit more about the nature of the mind. We said last week that from the Buddhist perspective, meditation is not simply something that is meant to, give rise to, um, more relaxation. It isn't something that is meant to just kind of help us to deal with stress or anxiety. Those are side effects that are very common in a person who has a meditation practice for sure. But meditation from the Buddhist perspective serves a wider purpose. And the degree of that wider purpose is, of course, entirely up to the individual. As we said, on one level, that purpose is to spend our time becoming more and more familiar with virtuous objects, loving kindness, compassion, generosity, ethics, these really constructive, useful, pro-social, beneficial states of mind that we can train in, that we can cultivate and grow. We can become over time more compassionate, more patient, more kind, more loving, more generous, more ethical, more concerned about the needs of others, and therefore less sort of self-obsessed, self-absorbed. We become focused on provide on being of benefit rather than taking, rather than wanting to just consume or to be taken care of. So kind of switch this attitude of being preoccupied with our own interests to becoming interested in the needs of others. So that's one, of course, certainly one level of talking about becoming more and more familiar with virtuous objects. From the Buddhist perspective, our mind is actually capable of much more than just that, than just becoming, as I said, becoming kinder or more patient. Um, the mind, our mind, the mind that we presently have, is the same consciousness, the same fundamental sort of mind that every other sentient being possesses. A sentient being, word sentient being that we use in English is a translation of a Tibetan term called Sem Chen, or mind possessor. So humans are sentient beings, animals are sentient beings, even going down to the level of a mosquito is a sentient being. Once you get down to viruses, bacteria, fungi, plants, those are living things, perhaps, not in all cases. It's debated that, viruses are generally not really considered to be alive. But many of those are living things, but they're not sentient things in the sense they may be able to, there may be a scientific way in Western biology or whatnot to talk about their ability to respond in various ways to their environment. Um, but there is no consciousness that is present in any of those forms. So they are not mind possessors, and therefore they are not sentient beings in this context. But certainly very, very simple being, as I said, fruit flies, mosquitoes, worms, those are all sentient beings, as are we. Um, and they all possess mind, they all possess consciousness, and that consciousness is the same fundamental consciousness, the same, not that there's one consciousness, but each of those consciousnesses is essentially the same sort of thing. It's having different experiences at different times, but the mind itself is essentially identical from one sentient being to the other. At various times, there are familiarities, there are habits, tendencies. There's a karmic history that is unique to every sentient being, but the essence of the mind isn't really different from one sentient being to the other. And this kind of mind, or just mind, consciousness, is capable, from the Buddhist perspective, not only of just growing in compassion, growing in patience, growing in loving kindness, but perfecting these positive qualities, and completely eliminating all trace of any negative qualities. And so that ultimate result is, from the Buddhist perspective, what is called a Buddha, an enlightened being, a fully enlightened being, or a fully awakened being, a being who has awakened to the fundamental nature of their mind, the fundamental capacity of their mind. And this is open to, as I said, every single sentient being. There are no sentient beings where that's not the nature of their mind. Now, there are certain sentient beings who at that moment can't really do anything about the fact that that's the nature of their mind. If you are a worm, you're not going to do much about being, about your situation. You're not going to change things in that particular lifetime. You're, you know, from the Buddhist perspective, minds are associating with forms, and that association's lasting for particular lifetimes. And then that association ends and a new association begins. So really, in order to actually take advantage of this nature of mind, you do need to really have a human rebirth. The other kinds of forms are not very well suited to actually developing this potential. But good news, we're all human. And so, from our perspective, we can, in this lifetime, if we want to, take that as our goal. That's what a Buddhist is. A Buddhist is someone who has taken that as their goal from the Mahayana perspective, the goal of full enlightenment. Um, and so, yes, in their meditation practice, it is true that over time, if that person is dedicated and serious and so on, they do become more patient and more kind and all of those positive qualities. But it can get to a point, because the mind is simply that, the definition of mind is that which is clear and knowing, or that which possesses clarity and awareness. And so the mind is not the body, the mind is not physical. The body, we also know that, we can develop our physical body. We can eat the right kinds of food, we can exercise, we can make changes, positive changes in our health, our cardiovascular health, our biological age, and so on, by doing the right kinds of physical things. However, there's a limit to that. We can only become so athletic up to a certain point, and then as we age, of course, the aging process is going to, have a role to play independent of what we would like to have happen in the body. But the mind, being non-physical, the mind doesn't have that limit. The mind can be developed limitlessly. The mind can, as I say, can perfect these positive qualities and can completely eliminate even the slightest stain of any kind of negative, any kind of self-centeredness or aggressive or painful state. Give me just 1 second. Let me plug something in. 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So again, so meditation, from the Buddhist perspective, serves that purpose. If a practitioner wants it to serve that purpose, it can serve that purpose. It can serve the purpose of limitlessly developing the mind, actually transforming ordinary mind. I would say that, we just have ordinary mind. Our mind is not enlightened mind. And so it's ordinary mind. But ordinary mind can become enlightened mind, can become the mind of a fully awakened, fully enlightened being. The Buddha's mind, in at some point in the past was ordinary mind, and he engaged in a process of transformation and perfected his mind and, you know, became the Buddha, became a Buddha, who we know as the historical Buddha. And we can do the exact same thing. Everything that the Buddha taught, including meditation, the Buddha taught for the purpose of helping people to replicate what he himself did. So if we choose, we can also accomplish that. So this mind that is mere clarity and awareness, as I say, it's non-physical, it's energetic. It, as I said, is associated with this present body, this form. That association began for us in the womb, and that association will end when this form dies, when this form is no longer able to support consciousness due to injury or disease, or just, the shutting down of the organs in old age, cancer, heart attack, what have you. The body at some point will no longer be able to host consciousness. Body and mind will separate, and the mind will continue from the Buddhist perspective. Um, so of course, this non-physical energy has a very, very intimate relationship with the physical body. We know, of course, that if you damage the brain, if you damage the sensory system, then that impairs how the mind functions. That's absolutely true. There are correlations between body and mind, but they are two different continua. They are very tightly interrelated, but the mind is said to have existed, prior to the coming together of this form in the womb, and the mind will exist after the dissolution of this form. So they are not the same thing, but they do, of course, bear a very close, intimate relationship in many, many ways. And we know that changes in the body certainly affect the mind, dementia, Alzheimer's, strokes, all kinds of things can impact the way. From the Buddhist perspective, it isn't really impacting the mind, but it's impacting the way that the mind is able to be expressed in that form, because the mind does depend upon the functioning of the body in order to express itself. As I said, our mind isn't fundamentally different than the mind of a cat or a dog or a worm, right? But cats and dogs and worms, their mind is quite limited in the way that it can be expressed given the form that that mind is associated with. And the same is true for us. When our form is damaged in some way, then the expression of our consciousness is also similarly going to be limited. But that's not an indication that the mind is, a product of the body. It's just that the mind and the body have an intimate relationship. So this is also understood, the nature of mind is understood to really be this stream of mental events. So the mind, which is just clarity and awareness, is always interacting with objects, either objects of the physical senses or objects of the mental sense. So, for example, we could be daydreaming, or we could be having a memory. Those are really purely mental events. Or we could be eating something, and that is both a physical event because there's data coming in from interacting with an external object, and then also we're making judgments about that. We think it could be delicious, or it could be unattractive in some way, and so our mind is relating to that sensory data by making judgments about it. So we have sort of two things occurring, and that's quite common. when you hear things, taste things, see things, touch things, the mind is going to make a judgment about that sensory data. You're going to see it as pleasant or unpleasant, or just kind of neutral, just sort of like if there's a pencil on your table, you're not particularly excited about the pencil, you're not particularly upset about the pencil. It's just a pencil on the table, so your mind is sort of neutral. But we always have a way of relating to things that we're interacting with through the lens of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Um, so the mind is really, it is made up of these interactions, these moment by moment interactions of thoughts, of feelings, of emotions, of sensory perceptions, cognitions, plans, all of these things that we're doing. These are mental events that are happening in the mind. It's like a river of discrete mental events. We might be thinking one thing that reminds us of another thing. And then and then that reminds us to think about something else. So we have just this domino effect that is always present in the mind of thoughts and feelings and so on. Um, and so that's what's happening in the stage of the mind within the field of clarity and awareness. There are these interactions with external events, with internal events, these moments of mind. Um, and they say in the teachings, they say that in the space of a single finger snap, which who knows how, maybe an eighth of a second, a fourth of a second, that there are 65 moments of mind or discrete mental events. So I take that to mean that great meditators who could really analyze their own minds were able to slow down what kind of the film of their mind, slow down the frame rate of their mind to the point where they could actually perceive 65 individual kind of interactions or moments of mental events in that incredibly short period of time. So the mind is dealing with a lot in every moment. um, okay, any thoughts or questions so far?
I have a question, Venerable. On so is in Buddhism, are they saying that meditation is what generates positive qualities? Is that the sole cause of generating positive qualities?
um well, so it's I would say it's an indispensable part of the process. um there's what in general, when they talk about transforming the mind, or
Mm,
um, trying to trying to move in a spiritual direction, move in a positive direction, they'll talk about what are called the three wisdoms. Um, so it's a it's a unified process. They talk about the wisdom that arises through listening, and then the wisdom that arises through contemplation, and then the wisdom that arises through meditation.
mm,
So um, because as I say, the Buddha, he lived, he taught. The purpose of his teaching was simply to explain, this is what I experienced, this is what I was able to accomplish, and here's my methods, here's what I did, how I did it. And so if you would like to do what I did, then do that, replicate this process. So what that means is that if that is our goal, then we need to first be really clear about what it was that the Buddha taught, um, and not just kind of make up our own ideas, right?
mhm,
When we hear teaching on impermanence, or we hear teaching on karma, or we hear a teaching on reincarnation, or all of these different topics, it's from the Buddhist perspective, it is important to actually understand what the Buddha meant by, because, for example, with impermanence, when we hear the word impermanent, we might think that what it means is that nothing lasts forever, that things will cease, things will stop existing, because they are impermanent. That's a sort of common way of using that word in English. But the problem with the teachings is that there are a lot of really technical terms, and they mean things that are very specific. So if we kind of try to internalize that teaching as things are, nothing is going to last, then we're missing out on what the full wisdom of the Buddhist teaching, because impermanence from the Buddhist perspective means that which changes moment by moment by moment. It doesn't in and of itself imply that it will cease, because
Mm.
there are phenomena like the mind that
Mm-hmm.
are impermanent but are eternal. Some phenomena are impermanent and temporary. Other phenomena are impermanent, but eternal. And the mind is an example of something that is impermanent but eternal.
Mm.
So, um, so the general idea is that first, if we want to progress in a Buddhist, spiritual direction, we have to spend time engaging in the wisdom that arises through listening. And they use the word listening, I think, from 2000 years ago, when people generally weren't literate. They literally were going to teachings and listening.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, for us, this also means reading and so on. But on this level, we're trying to get clear on what do the words mean, what is impermanence, how does karma, what are the four features of karma, what does the Buddha mean by all of this, so that we don't go down a path where we're internalizing something that's other than what the Buddha actually intended. Once we're really clear on that level of understanding, then we go to the wisdom that arises through contemplation. And that's sort of like critically thinking about that, like what are the implications of this, um, what um, what do I not understand, how does this relate to the other things that I've learned, how do I put this together in a systematic way that makes sense, that's comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
What gaps do I have in my understanding? What doubts do I have? What doesn't make sense to me? What seems like it might? What do I disagree with? Where do I get more information? So really critically reflecting on what we've understood. Once we've done both of those steps, now from the Buddhist perspective, now we're prepared to engage in meditation. So meditation really is the last step of this process. So we don't just simply jump right to meditation and skip these two. We
Mm-hmm.
engage in those two. And then once we've done all of that, now the mind is really prepared for meditation. And meditation is where we spend time trying to really absorb the mind into that topic, in a very single pointed way. And we talked a little bit about this idea of calm abiding, I think, last week. And that's something that Buddhists are definitely trying to pursue, becoming really excellent meditators. So without the wisdom that arises through meditation, definitely enlightenment is impossible. But that's also true of the wisdom that arises through listening and the wisdom that arises through contemplating. So they're all important. But, ultimately, single pointed concentration is necessary. We may not develop it in this life. We may not become enlightened in this life. Probably we won't. But at some point, we've got to develop single pointed concentration.
Mm.
At
No, you're
some point,
fine.
we've got to
Yeah.
become really expert meditators, because without that, we will never actually internalize this.
Okay. Thank you.
Did that answer? Was that?
Um, it sounds like I need to have some further understanding of the listening and the contemplation. I'm not too familiar with like contemplation, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I mean, it really depends on. I mean, from the Buddhist perspective, particularly the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, what is emphasized in this tradition, and we'll talk about this in a general sense, what's emphasized is the study and the practice of what's called the Lam Rim, or the stages of the path to enlightenment. That is really the main body of knowledge, where, so what that is it's a relatively recent effort, meaning, several hundred years ago rather than 2,600 years ago. But it's a relatively recent effort by some really incredible masters like Lama Tsongkhapa, Lama Atisha, these great masters that lived, about a thousand years ago rather than 2,600 years ago. Um, and what they did is they looked at the sutra material, all of the teachings of the Buddha, and they sort of extracted the main essential points of all of that material, and
Mm-hmm.
they condensed it, and they presented it to us in these books, these sort of practice books. Um, so that's what Tibetan Buddhist practitioners really spend most of their time focusing in on, are the insights that the Buddha had that were extracted and condensed and organized in a really systematic way, um, in the stages of the path, the Lam Rim. So, so definitely, yes, reading Lam Rim books, commentaries, etc. A really great place. I mean, it depends if you want to just sort of start reading like books by His Holiness, just sort of generally, that's a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful place to start. Because the Lam Rim, it's not super advanced, but it's getting into what a serious practitioner would be interested in.
Is
Um,
the law rim similar to like the Bible?
Sort of. It's the Lamrim itself. I mean, the Bible has the I would say in a way, the sutra material, like the collected sutras, are a little bit more similar to the Bible, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that the sutras are really they are conversations, um, that you kind of get a flavor of like different personalities and like stories and sort of analogies and allegories. And that's very kind of similar to the way the Bible is presented. Um, Whereas the Lam Rim is really just taking the actual meaning of that, and just it's a little bit more dry, it's a little bit drier, it's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
less, there aren't like people or stories or in the same way. So it's kind of more factual and sort of like a manual for enlightenment, but in the sense that it is the essential, the foundation. In that sense, it serves sort of the same role. It's what a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner relies on more than anything else. So in that sense, you could say it's analogous in that sense.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
The challenge with the sutras is that there are so many that it's really impossible for a person to who doesn't just who has like other things to do. It's really impossible to make sense out of them, because and also so many of them aren't even available in English. We're really blessed that pretty much all of the important Lam Rim texts are available in English at this point. Whereas there are still sutras that haven't really been translated.
Hmm.
I have a question.
Yep.
So, do you have any suggestions for what would be a good Lam Rim book to start with? That would be, pretty for an introductory type new person to read.
Yeah, I mean the one that I like the best to start with is called "Practicing the Path" by Yangtze Rinpoche. He's a living master in our tradition. He teaches at Maitripa College in Oregon, and he wrote that really for the Western mind. So he wrote that, with the Western mind uh, in mind, I guess you could say. So trying to present it, without all of the trappings of Tibetan culture, for example. So that I think that is a really great place to start. There's another book called From Here to Enlightenment that's a commentary on teachings that His Holiness gave, the Dalai Lama. From Here to Enlightenment is another really great book. Um, but yeah, I would say Practicing the Path is great.
And we could get that anywhere, or could we get it at the
Yeah,
Buddhist
yeah.
temple?
I mean, Amazon. We don't sell it. I don't think we have copies of it. But yeah, I mean, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Wisdom Publications. Yeah, it's pretty much available everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just looking at trying to find. Okay. So now I will introduce another meditation. In a way, this is sort of another breathing, another variation on breathing meditation. And often from the Buddhist perspective, of course, we'll talk about the different kinds of meditation. Breathing meditation is called a single pointed or a placement meditation, um, as opposed to an analytical meditation. There are two main types of meditation, which we'll go into. Breathing meditation is a placement or a single pointed meditation because the object, as soon as you tell yourself, I'm going to attend to the physical sensation of the breath, that object is just present with you, because you are breathing. There is a sensation that is accompanying the in breath and the out breath. So you can just, at any moment, you can just immediately move your mind to that object. An analytical meditation requires that you sort of set up the object using conception. So they're different kinds of, but they're both objects, right? Because if you take the breath as the object in the same way as anything else, when anything that isn't the breath arises in the mind, what you want to have for dinner, some argument that you had, then that is a distraction. And your goal is to move the mind back to the breath, just as it would be if it was an analytical meditation. So every meditation has an object. Some, by their nature, don't need to be generated with thoughts. Others, by their nature, do need to be generated with your thoughts before the object is really there to be attended to have your mind placed on it. So the next sort of variation on breathing meditation is called the 9 round breathing meditation. And often in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, it is analytical meditation that is emphasized. But prior to a session of analytical meditation, the meditator will engage in maybe 5 minutes of a breathing, some sort of breathing meditation, or taking the breath, taking like the body as the object, or taking the mind as the object. These are different ways of sort of transitioning into the session of meditation. And certainly it could be that the meditator might take the breath as the object for the entire, they might just do a whole session on the breath. But often, if a meditator is doing an analytical meditation, they'll preface it with a few minutes of breathing meditation so that when they get to the analytical portion, their mind is a bit subdued. Their mind is a bit more calm, because you're sort of transitioning from being busy, doing, having other things happening in your day, and you're sort of moving into that space. So if you give yourself sort of a, a buffer, between those two things, then your analytical meditation might be even more productive because you've sort of spent some time calming the mind, focusing the mind, making the mind a little bit more subtle before you begin. So the one that we have already done is sort of the basic, and that's perfectly great to do. This other one is called 9-round breathing, and it's more involved. There's a visualization aspect to it. It's a bit more complex. Um, so we will do that. Um, okay, so the visualization that does accompany this one, as I say, it's a bit complex. It comes from the visualization. This meditation comes from what are called the esoteric teachings of the Buddha. Technically, you could call it the Vajrayana tradition you may have heard, or the Tantrayana tradition, which is a separate canon, or a separate collection of teachings that go along with the sutra teachings. The Lam Rim are based on the sutra teachings. The esoteric teachings, the Vajrayana, the Tantrayana, those are all just words that mean the same thing. That is a collection of teachings that are meant really for practitioners who have engaged in sutra practice, who have kind of mastered sutra practice, and they're ready to move on to the Vajrayana, the Tantrayana tradition, or that corpus of material. In that material, the Buddha is teaching on the energy system, the subtle energy system of the body, how to manipulate the energies of the body, in order to really, and the purpose of that is really to be able to establish or to cultivate states of clarity, states of stillness that go beyond what can be accomplished if you're not working with the energy systems directly. And so that's really, its purpose. Its main purpose is to do that. Um, okay. All right. So, okay. So the visualization, as I say, the purpose of this meditation is to begin to sort of introduce the concept of these subtle energies and working with these subtle energies. So this energy system is said to, or is understood to, be part of a sort of network of what they call channels, which is, and I think it's probably quite similar. It comes up, I think, in a number of different cultures where they talk about, chakras, energy meridians, different things like that. I think this sort of thing comes up in these different cultures that have insight into this subtle energy system. So for the purpose of this meditation, or this meditation, we would focus on what are called the three main channels where this subtle energy is said to be flowing. So there are many smaller channels that kind of pervade the body. And of course, these are non-physical. You can't open up the body and find them. These are completely non-physical. They're sort of, you could say, energetic conduits, or pathways. And there's three main ones. And then there's many, many smaller channels throughout that kind of allow the mind to be able to be aware of all of the different aspects of the body. So the mind is the empowering condition. But the fact that, for example, you can feel cold on your knee is because your mind is able to pervade your whole form. And that pervasion is accomplished through these energy channels. And I think certainly, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and the nervous system, I think, plays a role certainly in this process as well, because we know, of course, that we have all of these nerves that pervade the body. So I think certainly that there's a correlation or some association between those two things for sure. So we do this visualization where there are these three main energy conduits, or channels, as I say. So the central channel, we visualize as beginning here between the eyebrows. And these three channels we visualize as thin, luminous, flexible tubes of light. And so the uh, the the central channel, they say, is about the diameter of your little finger. So just as a general idea. And so it begins here between the eyebrows, also the third eye, basically. And it runs up to the top of the back of the head. And then from there, it runs straight down in front of the spine. Um, and it terminates at a point 4 finger widths. So 4 finger widths below the navel, but inside the body, just in front of the spine. So the way to think of it is sort of like an umbrella, handle, because it goes up and curves back and then goes straight down. So you can think of that, straight, and then it kind of curves like an umbrella handle. Um, so that's the central channel, and that's what it's doing. And then you've got left and right channels. And these begin in the nostrils, the left or right nostril. The left channel is in the left nostril, right channel is in the right nostril. And they just do the same thing. They are also visualized as thin, flexible tubes of light. They're slightly smaller than your pinky finger. And so they also run up straight from the nasal cavity. They run up to a point at the top of the back of the head. And then they also run on either side of the central channel. And they also terminate at a point 4 finger widths below the navel. And then, and they curve into the central channel at that termination point. So the left and the right channels are curving into and kind of inside the central channel at that terminal point for finger widths below the navel and basically in the middle of the body, just in front of the spine. So the idea in terms of the visualization is that you're holding this picture of these three thin luminous tubes of light. Is that so far clear? Are there any questions about that? Okay, so it's called 9-round breathing because there are three rounds of three different ways of breathing. And the purpose of this meditation is to kind of clear out stale energies in the body, to kind of refresh the energetic system of the body. So we breathe in three different ways, and we do 3 breaths in each of these 3 ways. So that is 9. And so 9 rounds is one kind of cycle of this process. So the first way of breathing is to take your index finger on your right hand and to gently close your left nostril, physically, with your finger. And then you breathe in just through your open right nostril. And as you're breathing in, of course, you're visualizing that the energy that you're breathing in is traveling up through this right channel. And you're visualizing that you're breathing in kind of crystalline white light, or if you prefer a different color, whatever kind of works for you, that something that you would associate with, vitality and freshness, that sort of dynamic energy. Could be silver, could be white, whatever kind of resonates with you. You visualize that the air that you're inhaling is that sort of fresh, energetic energy. And so that energy is traveling up the right channel, and it's traveling down into, and then and as I said, it's terminating into the central channel at the bottom, because that right channel is curving into it. So you're kind of pulling this energy into the central channel. And then and so then that's the in breath, right? So it's an in breath with your left nostril closed. And then at the top of the in breath, you take your finger and you switch and you close your right nostril that you just breathed in through. And now you are exhaling through your left channel. So one way of visualizing this is that you can visualize that the central channel is kind of filled with, smoke or sort of dull gray energy. And if you think, the way that I sometimes think about this is like those tubes in those like oil lamps and things with the different colors, where it's sort of displacement is sort of the idea. So you're breathing in this vital energy, and you can visualize that it sort of travels up to the top of the central channel. And then because you're now exhaling, you're pushing down from the top of the central channel down and forcing out through the other channel this kind of stale energy, and it's coming out through the nostril. It's kind of being displaced or forced out. So you're bringing in this energy, and then you are dispelling the stale, whether you want to think of it as negative or stale or what have you, energy that's being forced out. And you can do this with, as I say, different colors, whatever sort of works for you. So you do this 3 times, breathing in through the right and then breathing out through the left. And then you just repeat that. You do that again. You breathe in through the right and out through the left, in through the right, out through the left. Trying to hold some sort of visualization that whole time with all 3 channels. And then you reverse the process. So now you close, instead of closing the left, you begin by closing the right, and you're breathing in through the left. So you're closing the right, you're breathing in through the left, and then you are closing the left and breathing out through the right. So you're just reversing the process that you started with, doing the opposite of what you started with. Instead of breathing in through the right, out through the left, now it's in through the left and out through the right. And again, same visualization as the first 3 times. So you do 3 breaths with that second way of breathing. Then you do another 3 rounds of a different kind of breath, where you're not closing either nostril. You're just breathing in through both nostrils. So through both nostrils now, on the inhalation, you're breathing in this vital dynamic energy, and it is curving into and filling up again in the same way, the central channel. But the difference with this, another difference with this, is that on the exhalation, you are breathing out through both nostrils, but the visualization of the energy leaving the body isn't through the nostrils. The actual visualization is that the energy is coming up through the central channel, and the stale energy is actually coming out of the opening of the central channel between the eyebrows. So it is true that you have air coming out of your nostrils, but that's not where you're visualizing the energy leaving. The energy is coming straight out of the opening between your eyebrows as you are exhaling through both open nostrils. So that's 3 rounds of each type of breath, and that's one cycle, is the 9-round breathing. Is that clear? Any questions, any thoughts about the 9-round breathing?
I have a question. So when you're doing the breathing, are you just thinking of the left? Are you thinking of all 3 channels when you're doing it, not just the side that you're working on the nostrils? You're doing all 3 channels?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to when you start the inhalation, right? Let's say you've closed the left nostril, and you're starting the inhalation. The sort of dynamic part of the visualization that's kind of changing moment by moment, is really only occurring in the right channel. But it's good to have in your mind's eye a picture of the fact that the other 2 channels are also there. There's just not really anything happening kind of in them at that time, because you're focused on filling the right channel with this vital energy, and thinking of it as sort of pooling at the bottom where the 3 channels are combining. And then when you're exhaling and you've switched, now the visualization, the main visual, again, the part of the visualization that's actually dynamic and moving and changing, is just where that energy is, kind of traveling up and then coming down and then coming out of the left channel. So nothing is really happening. The right channel is kind of just empty, but it's still there, like it still exists. There's just really nothing going on with it at that moment. But if you can, I mean, I think it's good to try to keep an understanding that this is all there. Just like I say, like if you think about it like pipes or tubes, and that like, energy or liquid or, is sort of doing what it's doing, but it's a system that is all present all at once. And it's just that not all of it has like a changing visualization. Um, and of course, this is very unfamiliar the first, number of times that you do it. So, you just like anything, you'll get better at it over time if it's something that resonates with you that you want to keep practicing. So it may be very unclear and, not at all vibrant and not at all consistent for a long time. And that's totally fine, totally reasonable.
And then also like with the third one, when you're doing that's when you would think of all three kind of happening at the same time in a way, right? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so with the inhalation, the central channel until the exhalation, there's not really anything. The energy is kind of it's coming
Oh,
in through both, and then it's sort of, pooling, you could say, or kind of being held. And then when
mhm.
you begin to exhale, then it's coming up and then sort of coming out.
Okay.
But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, at the very bottom of the central channel, you could certainly kind of have this sense that, that there's a filling or there's a pooling.
Okay. Thank you.
Sometimes
Okay.
I have a little
Mhm.
bit of a challenge visualizing. So do you have recommendations, suggestions for that?
I mean, I would say that really it is just familiarity. People say that, but when people say that, it's also true that if the meditation was to think about like your favorite food, right?
Mm,
Or to think about, your pet or your sibling or, your child or something, you could
mm,
very easily, right? That wouldn't be any
right,
problem. You wouldn't be like, I don't know what they look like, or I don't know. Like, no, if you visualize pizza or you could smell it, you could taste it, you would see the steam rising. And that's just because you're
right.
familiar. It's a familiar object. Um,
I
so
see.
it's it's really just, repetition is really all that there is to it. Um, so yeah, it's just patience and repetition and trying to add, over time, kind of adding to it. So if you need to kind of focus just on the one channel and like just really get that clear, and then add, another channel after, in a couple of weeks and try to get that clear, and then add the third channel after it. That's totally fine. Like if that works better for you, you can kind of build these visualizations up, over time. You don't have to feel that you absolutely have to have it all complete all at once.
Hmm.
Um, but it does come. I mean, it does come with repetition. So
And I guess if I Google 9 point breathe 9 round breathing, I would find like a diagram that would show these okay, because I think that would be helpful if I could see that.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure that yeah, and I mean it's your own visualization it doesn't have to be, mirror exactly, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm sure that I mean there are different kinds of visualizations for the channels and some of them are more. I mean, you might stumble upon, diagrams of like with all of the chakras and things, and that's not part, like this is a very simplified version of
Okay.
things that can, so you might find things that are much more advanced, um but yeah, I can try to see if I can come up with something and maybe next week see if I can share
Okay.
something. um
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
okay, so let's spend 5 minutes just kind of practicing this. Are there any questions before we does everyone feel comfortable doing that?
Yes. I'm willing to try.
Yes, me too.
All right, so that's what we'll do. Again, just with your ring finger, we'll start with closing our left. And we just, again, so we try to begin by creating that visualization to the best of our ability. These three thin, flexible, luminous tubes of light. One that begins here, goes to the back of the head, straight down in front of the spine, terminating 4 finger widths below the level of the navel. Right channel beginning in the right nostril, left channel beginning in the left nostril, just going parallel to the central channel, just following the central channel, doing all the same things that it's doing, going straight up, top to the back of the head, straight down, and then curving into the central channel on the left and the right. And just take a minute to think that these three energetic highways or conduits exist in the body in a very, very subtle way. And we close the opening to the left channel. We just gently breathe in through the right nostril, breathing, visualizing that we are breathing in very vital, very energetic, dynamic energy. And then as we exhale, we are forcing that energy upward through the central channel and back down, clearing out the central channel of any stale energy, which is expelled through the left nostril, the left channel. And we just repeat that 2 more times. And now we go in reverse, breathing that energy in through the left nostril. And expelling it through the right as it travels up and back out of the central channel, forcing out any stale negative energies. And 2 more times. And then we visualize that by inhaling, we bring in that energy through both of the left and right channels. And then at the top of that inhalation, we visualize that that energy is shot up through the central channel, forcing out any stale negative energies through the opening between the eyebrows as we exhale. And then just go through one more cycle on your own. All right. How was that?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, I feel a lot more, I don't know, like it's settled in like my internal self, like my stomach. I just want to say that. I know that sounds odd, but it kind of did settle that
Yeah.
somehow.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I had a question. I'm not sure if I was. So when we breathe in, is it like you're thinking, like you're saying, it goes through your nose, but over your head and towards your back, like behind you, right? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
It's
Or,
it's it's right in front of the spine.
oh, right in front of the spine.
Yeah. So it's sort of, I would say, maybe 3/4 of the way into the body.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I like doing it with a group, with us. I think it's powerful.
Yeah. The one thing that I found with this is that you have to make sure that you don't breathe too quickly because you can get dizzy. It can, if you, particularly if you do it for like 5 or 10 minutes, you kind of have to make sure that you're breathing nice and slow because if you're breathing quickly, you can get a little bit dizzy with it. But yeah, and it can be helpful for me sometimes to think about like when I'm exhaling, if I think about the muscles, in the diaphragm that are actually doing the exhaling, if I think about that kind of being involved in this process of like forcing the energy out or being involved in this kind of moving the energy, I feel like that helps me with my visualization when I get in touch with the actual muscles that are in the diaphragm.
Yvonne, these meditations are listed under material list. You
Oh,
see
okay.
that?
That's good to know.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
the event page there is a materials list. Yeah.
Because I was the way I was doing it, which I believe probably wasn't correct. Like I was thinking of almost like a circle, like it was coming in through and then going to my back, and then I was kind of breathing it out, coming to the front of my body. If that makes sense, it was like this circle, but really it's not like that, right? I don't know if I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly.
Um, yeah, so because the three tubes, they're kind they're sort of they're totally separate. It's
Mm-hmm.
so it's just it's coming
Mm-hmm.
in and going straight up, kind of again like an umbrella handle,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then it's going straight down, um, and then it curves into, and then I mean, in a way, so it's coming up and then going down, and
Yeah.
then it's coming back up. So it's sort of like a loop de loop in a way. It's
Yeah.
it's not a circle, but it's something.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
geometric shape of some sort. Um,
Okay.
um, you know, it goes up and then straight down, and then it comes up and then back down, and then kind of back up, and then
Okay.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's sort of like a racetrack, sort of.
Okay. Okay. The racetrack. Okay. I think having like a visual of it somehow for me would also be um, really helpful. But either way, it was helpful anyway, either. But I would really definitely want to learn it correctly because I'm sure it's even more powerful. But so for me, I think I need to see like something really like a kind of idea with the body, and then I would definitely kind of get it a little bit. But I still really did enjoy it. So thank you.
Okay.
I do have
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I, I do have
Yep.
another question. So if we
Yep.
do
Yep.
that, if we do the breathing, so do we go? I know it's three breathing, and they were done three times, but how many rounds should we do of the three?
It's really up to you.
Okay,
You know, I would say, yeah, it's I would say at least two. Anywhere from two to six, maybe, I think is a good, you
start.
know.
Okay, thank you.
You had mentioned the dates for next week. I think you had
Mhm.
said the 23rd or 24th, but I believe, isn't there a speaker or somebody on the 24th, in the evening, or did I get that wrong?
There shouldn't be, not until, no, not, it's a Friday. I don't think we've got anything.
Okay,
Uh,
maybe it was later
There,
then.
no, I mean, yeah, again on Thursday, I mean, it is true that there's a basic program class, but we can certainly overlap with that. We have a different
Okay,
account. So that's fine. On the 23rd there is, but not Friday. But yes, there's a basic program class on the 23rd, but that's fine. We can
okay.
overlap.
So we're gonna meet Thursday then, the 23rd?
If whichever of those, if that works for both of you, and then
Yvonne, what works for you?
Okay, so it would be the 23rd at the same time. Would it be the same time?
yep, 7 o'clock.
I mean, I can do whichever works for everyone. So yeah, I could be available if we wanted to wait. I'm fine with that too, but I can also do it Thursday. Yes. So yeah,
Yeah, I could do either date, either. I mean, two.
yeah. So yeah, I can do Thursday if we want to do that.
All right, that's what we'll do.
Okay.
All right, I think that's good. We've got a few more minutes. So if there are any questions, we can address questions. Otherwise, we'll just save new material for next week.
I guess I have somewhat of a question. Nothing
Mhm.
like so because I'm really trying to practice, some type of practice of meditation. So do you feel like every day I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's probably hard to say if there's just a really good starting type of meditation to do daily. I mean, I've been trying to show for the 7:30 meditations that you all share, which I find very helpful too. But also, just something if I don't know, just as a new student, I guess, what would you suggest as a good one to kind of really start to get like a daily practice with? And that can be next week if you want to bring it or whichever, but I just would like to know from you what you would suggest.
Um, I mean, ultimately, I think at the beginning, the real purpose is to get into a habit. So, I mean, eventually, you know, if a person is like getting into the Lam Rim and doing the whole thing, then there are certain topics that maybe don't resonate as much where you're kind of like, well, okay, I'm still going to do it, even though it doesn't really resonate with me right now. But that's probably not the best approach for a person who's really trying to like get into a really, at the beginning, I would say whatever you feel really resonates with you. Um, so in terms of maybe places to look, um, there's Venerable Sangye Kadro, who's written under her birth name of Kathleen MacDonald, but she's a venerable. So Venerable Sangye Kadro, she literally wrote How to Meditate. So that is a really good book. It has a lot of analytical meditations in it, different. And then she also wrote Awakening the Kind Heart, which is another, which focuses more on um, specific meditations for loving kindness and compassion and rejoicing and kind of those other things, whereas How to Meditate has um, a variety of other meditations. So if that's what if you really did just want to do like a breathing meditation, if that's what you resonate with, then that's really, I would say, just do what feels best, whatever you get excited about, is probably the place to start. So whether that's, loving kindness meditation or breathing meditation, that certainly, and How to Meditate is a great book. How to Awaken the Kind Heart is a great book. She just wrote another book called How to Meditate on the Lam Rim, which is another, of course, that's another option that's going to be more structured and take you through the different, um, all of the different contemplations of the Lam Rim. But that is a brand new book that she just wrote, just finished like a month or two ago, or couple of months ago. Those are all really good books where you can find um, individual, guided meditations that are written out for you to kind of take a look at. But and then if you're like, this particular thing is just, not excited about it, then I would just not start with that and kind of do maybe probably more so the things on, I feel like generally the things that really kind of spark really positive feelings in people, like the loving kindness, the metta meditations, the thing that really leave you with a very positive experience. I think those are generally the best. If you're talking about analytical, if you wanted to, you know, do a visualization meditation again, and in that book, How to Meditate, she gives you options for different enlightened beings that you can visualize. Tara, some people really like Tara practice. Tara is a female Buddha that is a embodiment of the energy of overcoming obstacles, overcoming fears. There's medicine Buddha practice, which is an embodiment of healing. So there's Chen Rezig, which is the embodiment of compassion, the kind of enlightened energy of compassion. So some people really resonate with that kind of visualization practice, where they're visualizing these representations of enlightened mind, enlightened activity, and there's mantra you can do associated with that. So I would say really it's about a certain amount of experimentation to find what's going to really be impactful for you, because you want it to be a very positive experience. And then you want to make sure that your sessions are short, so you feel refreshed at the end. You don't feel like you're kind of dragging and forcing, because if that's if that's what you're associating your practice with, very quickly you'll become averse to your practice. Um,
Was that book, How to Awaken the Kind Heart. Is that the one with the Tara meditations and the loving kindness?
I don't know if Tara is in How to Meditate. I think there might be
Okay.
a version of Tara practice in Awakening the Kind Heart, but Awakening the Kind Heart is on compassion and loving kindness.
Mhm.
Um, there's um, yeah, and I mean there's there's also versions of that too, and these books, they're not just meditations, there's also some exposition, some explanation, some background. um so I mean, all three of them are wonderful books, but How to Meditate is broader, and Awakening the Kind Heart is a little bit more specific.
Mhm.
there's there's really no like wisdom, what I would call wisdom meditations in Awakening the Kind Heart, with like meditations on impermanence or death, or the kind of wisdom teachings are not really. It's the
Mhm.
Awakening the Kind Heart is just the compassion teachings.
Mm, okay.
I got an off the wall question, Venerable. In Buddhism, um, do they believe you can communicate with your ancestors?
As far as I know, not really,
Okay.
because I mean, it could be very, very shortly after death. Um,
Mhm.
they describe the mind, very shortly after the moment of death, as still having a connection, some
Mhm.
connection, some connection to their previous life. And so they actually describe that mind is sort of like when the mind is free of the body, they describe the mind as being able to travel. The mind takes an energetic form, um, after separating from the body, the physical body, and that form can travel, they say, at the speed of thought. Um, and they do describe that mind may be kind of hanging around the people that it was connected to, because there's still that force of familiarity. But that's not going to last for very long. That's going to get weaker and weaker pretty quickly. And then that transitional period, can only last for a few weeks at most, before that consciousness is definitely in a different form, connected to a different form. So there's no specific teachings about any kind of ability to connect once that consciousness has fully associated with a new form. That consciousness has no, just like we have no idea who we were, in a past life. um that's just, mind doesn't have any connection at that point.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right, so yeah, so we will, I'll try to get the website updated in the next day or so, because it still says the 21st. But yeah, so we'll meet on Thursday at 7 for
Okay.
class 3.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you so much.
Yeah.